Okay, so again, just make sure your cameras are turned off. I still have someone that has a camera on, so we just want to make sure that my screen is the one that is maximized. So what I have open here is I have Chroma Inspire. So even if you have Chroma Lux or Chroma Plus, all of the information will still apply. And again, this is a beginner introduction class. So I'm going to cover all of the tools that we have on the left-hand side. These are all of our digitizing tools. On the top of the screen, we have more so like alignment tools, view tools, so we can see like our grid, we can see a 3D view. So the top of the screen is more so just for like arranging, and the left side is all of our digitizing tools. So the first thing to know and understand about digitizing is we are creating a stitch path and we're telling the machine what to do. So it is very important that we have a properly digitized file. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what kind of machine you have. The machine is just reading the file. So if it's not digitized properly, it will cause lots of issues, or it will just be really messy. So it's important to know the theory of it and understand what we're actually doing here. We have to decide on what stitch type we want to use and create the shapes for our files. So what we're doing when we're digitizing is usually we're taking a file that we already have, like a JPEG, and then we're going to create the digitized version. So we're creating these stitch paths. So when we're digitizing, it's not just a matter of opening a file and just clicking convert and having it be perfectly done. It doesn't work that way. We do have an auto digitizer key, and you guys have probably heard of this before, auto digitizing. This is just a tool to help us get some things done, but it's not just one click and it's done type of feature. So just keep in mind the auto digitizer, it's not going to work well on every file. It's really meant for those clean vector files or really, really simple high resolution JPEGs or PNGs. So we have a couple different ways of starting the design. Like, how do we begin? Well, I did mention that most of the time we have a JPEG that we're going to work with. So you might already have your company logo, or maybe you have something that you designed with a Photoshop. So if we're going to bring in a JPEG, there are two different ways that we can do this, but the best way is to use the backdrop tool. So we are kind of starting right in the middle of this left side of options, and I will talk about each one down the list. But when we're starting up a design, we're going to use the backdrop tool, okay? So it looks like a little mountain underneath the ruler. And when we click there, we can select our backdrop. So on in the backdrop key, we can, I'm just going to take a look at what I have here. So let's say we have this logo. So we can open up our logo and you can see this Deco Summit design is just a JPEG, or it was a PNG actually, and I'm just placing it onto my screen so that I can then digitize over it. So then I can choose what stitch type I need and put it in these spots. So use the text tool for the text, use our different stitch types to fill in all of these areas. So the backdrop tool is a great feature that you can use to place your image on screen. And now it's just a matter of tracing. Okay. So we bring in our image, and then we're going to choose our different stitch types to then digitize over this. So I want to go through our 3 main stitch types, and we can look at what they look like and when we're going to use them. The run stitch, so we have the run stitch, the classic satin, and the complex fill, and these are at the bottom left of your panel. So I would recommend to become familiar, play around with these. A lot of learning and becoming comfortable with the software is just playing around with it. This is not something that you're going to break, not like a machine. So you can really just like go wild with it and just start clicking around and exploring what these options are. So the run stitch is going to be just a single line of thread. The run stitch is very thin. You can't thicken this up because it's just thread. The needle's just traveling in a path in a single line, so a running stitch. So the run stitch is used for small details. You can layer this stitch over top of a different type of stitch. And the way that we use this, I'm just clicking anywhere to sort of create whatever pattern or path I need. So the run stitch is really thin, and just for details or small areas, you can use this stitch to really create a lot of detailed areas or shapes. Like you can make grass and hair and shoelaces. So just these smaller areas. The classic satin stitch is what we see on most lettering. So a satin stitch, it looks very smooth and very satiny. It's going to have sort of like a sheen to it. And we can sort of see that in this realistic view. So when you look at a lot of small logos, especially when they have text, it's going to be a satin stitch. So when you look at any sort of sports type of logo, an Adidas or Nike, those are satin stitches. So the satin stitch is for smaller details, smaller areas, lettering, and I mention smaller details and smaller areas because our satin stitch, it can only go so wide. If I tried to make a really thick column in a satin stitch, you're going to notice something like that on your screen. And that's just showing me that that's not going to stitch out. It has gaps. There are a bunch of stitches missing because the machine, it's not going to jump a whole inch over and just have like a big long thread hanging. So the satin stitch, it can really only go so wide. So if you ever see something like that on the screen, that's not going to work on the machine. And so just keep it a little bit smaller or thinner. So classic satin, smaller areas. If we take a look at this logo over here, I could really use the satin on, say, the white of the D. I could use it on the blue shape that's in the middle. I could use it on the small blue like curve items. So I could really use it in a lot of this design, just not the black background. So the complex fill is the stitch type that we can really fill in a lot of color. So the black background of this design would definitely be a complex fill. So the complex fill stitch type, we can just make sort of any shape we like, and it just fills in with like a side-to-side stitch that just goes from, one area to one corner to the next corner. So complex fill is going to have a really even sort of look, even texture, whereas the satin is always going to be, those threads are really like smooth side to side. So our 3 different stitch types, it is important to know what these are and how you use them and when. So the run stitch for small details, we can layer this over top of things. The satin for those letters, and the maximum width of a satin is 0.8 inches. So if I were to even measure this across, this one is 0.66, but just keep in mind that if you ever see some gapping like that, that's not going to be good. So you want it to make sure it fills in all the way on the screen. So we know what our stitch types are, and now it's a matter of actually then creating the trace. So starting up, how we're going to make this shape or design. So we have 3 stitch types that we can freely use just by sort of clicking onto the screen and tracing and making short lines. If I wanted to trace this shape here, I can just sort of click, 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 and make the shape. Now I'm going to then show you guys how to actually make quick and easy shapes, such as the circle. So we're skipping around a bit on this left side. We went through that backdrop tool. We went through those 3 stitch types. And now I'm going to take a look at this tool that has a circle and a square. And if we hover over that, you'll see that it says artwork. So our artwork tool, if we click on this small arrow, we have all of these preset shapes. So your rectangle, your ellipse, stars, hearts, leaves. You even have a flower here. If you click custom, it will open up a small catalog of some other shapes like arrows and banners and moons. So in the artwork tool, if I wanted to make a perfect circle, that's where I can click on the ellipse tool, and it allows me to draw out circles. So if I need like an oval, I can make an oval. If I want a perfect circle, we're just going to hold down on the control key and it will keep the height width the same. So I can make a circle very easily with that artwork tool. And after I make the artwork, we then need to convert it into a stitch type. So right now I just have this open ring, and what we're using in combination with the artwork tool is we're using that auto digitizer. So when I click auto digitize, now I have this ring of run stitches. So it recognized the ring, the circle, and it's converted it into a stitch type. Now, if we want a different stitch type from this circle, well, I would need to fill it in. So in the upper right-hand corner, we have type. And so we have either an outline or we have a fill. And so when I click on fill, we now have this circle filled in. And then if I click auto digitize, now I have, this is a complex fill shape. And so I can use this. There's still a little black border around it. And I can use this shape for my design. So I can easily resize it and just place it on top. Just like I mentioned, we're just sort of tracing. So that can be the base of my design. And I can just delete these other shapes. I'm just selecting them with my mouse, just deleting. So we were able to get a run stitch. We were able to get a complex fill stitch. Now, if I wanted to make a satin stitch, so let's look at this blue ring around the design. How would I get that? Well, we're just going to do a little trick. So I have one circle here. I'm going to create another circle, and I want to, of course, fill it in. I'm going to change the color and just fill it in. And so if I have circles layered like this, and I were to auto-digitize them together, then only what we see, only what is visible, will actually auto-digitize. So I want to place them on top of each other, like perfectly. This is where you have your alignment tools come into play. I'm going to select both, and I have at the top of my screen alignment options. So I want them to be horizontally aligned and vertically aligned. And that just means that the purple is right in the center of the green. So if I were to select both and auto-digitize, then it auto-digitized only what was visible on screen. And now I have this ring of satin stitches. So the artwork tool is what you can use to make a lot of really quick, easy shapes. So I have a star. I could keep it in a run stitch, and now I have a little run stitch star. I could fill it in. So in the upper right hand corner, if we fill it, then you auto digitize. So the artwork is meant for use with that tool. Okay. So what we're going to look at now. So I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that we have here. And the first question that popped up was, how can I change the colors in a photo that was auto-digitized? You can only change the colors after the fact. And to change colors, the whole time that I've been changing these colors around, you're just selecting an area or selecting an object, and you're going to right click on one of your color chips that you have at the bottom. So I select this green circle, and I'm going to right click on the black color chip. I will select this green ring. So when I'm selecting, I'm on the select tool. If I have the ruler selected, then I'm not going to be able to select something new. So your select tool is that black arrow at the top. That one, you'll really be switching like back and forth. If I'm clicked onto the text tool, well, I'm not going to be able to select something. So just make sure you have that chosen, and just click on the object. Just click. So I selected the green ring, and I can right click on the blue. Now, if I want a darker blue, if you actually left click, it will give you your color. So I can change the color of the actual color chip. Click to change the color, or a left click to change the color chip. So another question that we had was, how wide can a satin stitch be? And that was 0.8 inches wide. That is the max. So if you're seeing some of those stitches missing like I showed, then that's not going to work. So just make sure you shrink it down. So if if you had a shape that looks like it's going and it's not going to finish the shape, so don't have a file that looks like that and put it onto the machine. There's no use in trying. So just make like that that has those missing stitches, because the machine won't know what to do with it. So so another question was, how do you make multiple shapes without them being connected and change the color? When I'm making multiple shapes, they aren't connected at all. These are all separate objects. So if I wanted to separate them, they're already separated unless you grouped them together. That's something that you could do, but it's something that you would have to know that you grouped. So they are all separate, and if I wanted to make one object a different color, I'm going to right click on the color chip. If I change that purple to a different color, it will change these two purple. Keep that in mind, because if then I still want purple, then I should maybe add more color chips. And you have this plus and minus key at the bottom right. So if you change the actual chip, it will change everything in that color. If I just want to change this one circle, then right click and I can change just that one. Okay. So the way that I was filling those in, the circles or any shape, look at the top right of the screen. So select the object, top right of the screen, you have outline or you have fill. And so I clicked fill and you click apply. So any artwork you make, it will initially just be an outline. And we have to make sure we actually select that object. So this is where you're going back to that select tool to make sure it's highlighted like this. So I need to make sure that this object is selected before I choose fill in the upper right hand corner. Okay. So the questions that popped up about filling them in and separating them, you're just doing all of that manually, just selecting, filling it in. And then when I was changing colors, again, at the bottom right of the screen, you have plus and minus, and you can add more color chips. And then again, left click to change the actual color chip, right click to change the object to that color. Okay. So we went through the artwork tool. And so we saw an example of how we're really starting up this design. So if I wanted to really, build off of this, like Deco Summit patch, well, I have the background, I have the blue ring, and then I can start tracing over all of the other bits. I could use maybe my text tool to create the letters. So when we're digitizing, we're just creating these layers, and I'm starting from the back. So the black shape would definitely stitch out first. And then I could have the insides go on top, of course. So if we want to, align these, make sure they're perfectly aligned, and we want to keep that together, that's where we could right click and we could group. So I don't want to accidentally move that ring or move the black part. So if we select them and we align them perfectly, then I can right click, group together, and now when I move, they're all one object. So if I wanted to try and change the color or maneuver it or change the size, they're going to work as one object, so one complete. And I can always ungroup, so I can right click and ungroup, and that's easy to go back and forth to do. So that would be a good circumstance to group. So now I can then work on the rest of the design. So a question in regards to taking something away, we're just needing to select. So we just need to make sure we select things. So using our selection tool, and you're just selecting the object. If you can't seem to grab it on screen, you have a list of all of your objects in the lower right-hand corner. So if I wanted to select a yellow item object on my screen, I can select it here. That would work as well. So you can see all of the objects in your lower right-hand sequence panel. So if I need to move these around, I can just tap on it with my mouse, or I can select it in the lower. And when I'm deleting, I'm just selecting it, clicking delete on my keyboard. So if we were going to continue this design, let's talk about the text tool. So the text tool, there's a text tool and there's a monogram tool. And the only thing that the monogram tool does is it will arrange your 3 initials in a monogram format. So when we see a monogram format, it looks like that, where you have your middle initial or your last name initial would be the largest in the center. So when you think of monogram, that's the standard style, and that's all that the monogram tool does. If I tried to type out more than 3 letters, it's not going to work. So if you try to use the monogram tool and type out your name, then it's just going to look like a name. So the monogram is meant for your initials. Now the text tool, so this is what we're using when we want to make any text. And in your catalog of fonts, so if you type out, you have a little box in the upper right hand corner. You can type out whatever you need there. So I'm just typing with my keyboard in that upper right hand corner box. Okay, so we're looking at the upper right hand corner. So you type out what you want here, and you can make multiple lines if you need to. So I made 2 lines. I'm gonna have Decasummin on top, maybe on the bottom. I can add some spaces too. So, anything that you type there, that's really what's going to show up on your screen. Now, the box to the right, where I have that A, B in yellow, that is where, if I click into that box, that's my font catalog. So these are all pre-digitized fonts. And when I select any of these are pretty much ready to go. The only thing that you might change on these pre-digitized fonts is the density. So the density is how much space is in between each stitch. So density right now is very high because I can see a lot of space in between these stitches. If I lower the density, that means there's less space in between each stitch. So when you're using the text tool, type out what you would like. The next tab over, so you have that T tab at the top. The fill tab is where you'll see density. And density is how close those stitches are to each other. So 0.3 density means there's 0.3 millimeters in between each little stitch. If I tried to raise this up, we have more space in between each stitch. Okay, so that's how density works. So right now there's a whole millimeter in between. If I go really, really far down, then you have a lot less space. So 0.3, 0.4, those are really your sweet spots for density. It would be very rare to go any lower or any higher. So lower is for maybe 3 or something very specific. Higher, very, very small lettering. You could maybe go higher. So anyway, the text tool, you're just typing out what you want and you have that catalog to work with. Now, I want this text to be curved, so we do have an option just above the apply key. You have the type, and we can make a circle type. And so what it's going to do is arrange your text in a circle shape. So since I only have one line of text here, it made it going up, like round. And I actually need it the opposite way. Just add another line. So the top line is essentially empty, and then Deco Summit is actually the second line. So that's your trick there. So we place our text, and we can always how it curves just by clicking back onto that text tool. But that is just a little demo of that feature. So we went through a couple of these main tools on the left, and I just want to go through top down and really show and explain each one. We have our selection tool, which I've been using, and this is what I've been telling you guys how you're moving things, changing size. The select tool is what you will grab objects with. So I can grab this, I can move it, I can even rotate it, I can change the size. So selection tool is for grabbing onto objects. The key below it, the shape tool. Now we have an entire webinar on shaping and editing because there is a lot that we can do with the shape tool. But basically, what we're doing with the shape tool is we can edit our actual outlines. So I can actually edit the whole entire shape. So the select tool is just for changing the size. Like I can shrink or enlarge. But the shape tool is for me to actually morph these outlines, or I can move the actual points. So all these little blue dots, that's where I had initially clicked onto the screen. So your shape tool is going to be to edit shapes, okay? So we have the zoom tool below it, and that will give you a little magnifying glass, and you can draw like an imaginary box. So I'm just kind of clicking and dragging with my mouse to zoom into a specific area. So if you're looking at a big file like this and I need to really zoom in on the T of Deco Summit, I can drag this and it will zoom right in to that area. So the magnifying glass or the zoom is there to really highlight something specific. Okay. Can always go back to, say, your kind of standard view, or use your mouse, like the scroll on your mouse. The pan tool, it's a little hand. So when you click on the pan tool, you're kind of using that hand to move the screen. That's a good way of like remembering or understanding what that is. So we're just panning around on the screen, that's all. And you can actually activate the pan tool bar. If I'm in the middle of something, I can just click on the space bar. I'm tapping down on the space bar, and you see that my hand is appearing and disappearing. So I'm just tapping on space bar and I can move around. The ruler is for you to measure a specific area. If I want to measure this design, it's about 4 inches high. So you can measure an area. I can measure the thickest or thinnest part of something. It's just a little ruler. That's it. Self-explanatory, very simple. If I want to see the entire design size, I can look at the very top of my screen. So I can actually see I have the total width of this is 9 inches and the height is 6 inches because I have 2 objects here. So the backdrop tool, we did go over that. So that is my best way. And it works with almost any file, not a PDF. PDF is really specific to Adobe, and it's just not compatible with Chroma. So if you have a PDF, just save it as a different file. Use the backdrop. Bring those in too. So backdrop is there. The shape tool or the artwork tool. So for those simple shapes that we make, and you're either keeping it open or select it and fill it in. Okay. The text tools, and then our 3 main stitch. So we did go over changing colors. That's important for us to know how to do. And really, even if this Deco Summit text on the screen is green, it really doesn't matter what color it is on my screen. I just want to make sure I differentiate it from the background and the blue ring, because I want to be able to assign a different color. So the colors here, you can certainly match them. If you want to match the green that you have, you can definitely do that. But if you really get into it, it can be a time saver to just assign different colors. And what you're using for the machine is you're going to go to File, Print Preview, and that is your run sheet. So hopefully you guys have all taken your machine training class, and you'll know that the run sheet is what we need to print out or look at in order to see which step goes when. So it tells me number 1 is the black background, number 2 is blue, number 3 is green Deco Summit. So I could make this red, white, and blue. I can make the background red, then the blue ring, then white. You can assign any colors on the machine. You just need the run sheet to tell you the sequence. Okay? So we did go over how to change those colors, so we can do that. Very simple, easy, just by right-clicking on those color chips. Now I want to go through something that's very, very important, because we need to know how to save the correct file formats, okay? So before I go on to talking about saving, I'll answer the questions that I see, and then I want to make sure that the last part is really, really taken note of, because it's important. The text here that I changed, what I did to get it facing the other way is I added an empty line. So I'm looking at the top right of the screen, and instead of having Deco Summit on the very top in that box, I just added an empty line. So I have my cursor next to the D, click enter, and you see the top is empty. So it changes the way that it's arranged. So that's how I did that there. Okay, so 3 lines of text, it's probably not going to work in that circle, so keep that in mind. So we are going to talk about trimming, and that we're going to take, then we're going to go into saving. So I think I did answer the questions. So moving the text the other way around. We will talk about jump stitches, and we're not going to finish the whole design. We're not digitizing logos start to finish. We're just talking about basics here. So jump stitches. When you have a lot of objects that are very close to each other in the same color, you will notice that the program has a little stitch that jumps from one object to the next. And we can also see that in our text here, because the text is small and the machine just wants to jump from letter to letter. We really only have 2 little jump stitches in Deco Summit, and we can remove those. It's very easy to do so. And in the green objects, we definitely have these longer jump stitches. So the text, if I select this, I want to add a command. So a command, if we look at the top right corner where we've been looking all along, the second to last tab shows commands can be anything from a color command, so you can actually change colors, assign it to be 21, it's going to be blue. So those are just the color chips. So you can assign colors here, but here you see text commands at the bottom. So text commands, I could change the color. So I could color change. Now every letter is a different color. That'll just allow me to choose whatever colors I might want on the machine. And you have a trim command. So the default is set to trim if it's longer than 2 millimeters, but we can certainly trim in between characters. So CH select our text. We would go to the command in between characters, and that gives us a trim in between each. When it's not in regards to, when we want to remove these jump stitches from the triangles, then we're going to add a different type of command, but it's going to be in that same box. I want to select all of these, so I just want to make sure I kind of highlight all. I can just drag. Why don't we just select all of the green objects? So in the lower right-hand sequence panel, I can select them there. Now that they're all selected, we're using that same commands tab, and we're adding in an end command to trim. Select all objects, click on the command tab, add an end command to trim. And when I click apply, there we have it, they're trimmed. Okay, so we went over getting rid of jump stitches, and now another question was, how can you change format? Well, that would be saving as a file type. So I want you guys to write this down. You will always save the original RDE. The RDE is the working file type, the Chroma file type. So when you go to File Save As, you want to make sure you save the original RDE file. That's going to be the extension. So it's going to say decosummit.rde. Then you save a copy as the DST. So don't go to immediately save it as DST. Make sure you save the working file type. Okay, so always save original RDE, because you can't edit a DST file, you can't see any of the commands, you can't see the correct colors, you won't be able to edit the shapes. A DST is only meant for the machine. It's not meant to edit or work with. So our machines take DST. You can save into many from Chroma. So if you have a Brother machine or a ZSK or any other machine, you can save into that format most likely. So, but for ours, DST is the format. Okay. So when you're doing that, you're just going to File, Save As, save it as the RDE, then go to File, Save As, and change the format to DST. So you always have two copies. In Edit, I'm going to open the RDE file. Okay, so we had one more question that was Juana says, I'm lost as far as getting the stitches in the circle background. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. The circle background here, this black background, what we did is we used the artwork tool and we made a circle and we filled it in, and then we auto digitized it. So the program, Chroma, is seeing this green circle and it's filling it in with stitches. So that's how we got that shape. So we just auto digitized. And I just need that. I don't need the black. I can keep it if needed, or if not, just tap on delete. And so when we are finishing a design or when we are creating it, we're just using our stitch tool, and our cursor is just our pencil. So we're just clicking on the corners of a shape. That's how we're making. So I'm clicking on the corner, clicking on this corner, just moving around the curve, just click, 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 and we're just tracing with our cursor. Okay, and so if you haven't already, I would highly recommend to also take the shaping and editing webinar. I believe we have one posted on the YouTube channel already from the past. So that's a good one because it goes into in-depth just using stitch types and just making shapes and how you can edit them. So if I select this, I can, I can really move these points if needed. So another question, a point, so you're going to right click on the point and you can delete the point. And then how do I move this shape? I select it and I move it. So just select tool, make sure you guys are using that. That you're moving things easy. So select the text, I can move it, you can change the size. So ultimately I'm keeping everything on. Like I would keep this here and I can turn off the view of that. So you have these little eyeballs next to your shapes and objects, and I can just hide it, and I'm keeping everything on top. And then once I'm finished, I can have everything show up, and then I would have my finalized design. So you can definitely keep everything on top, and that's when I'm telling you, you're tracing, so you're just tracing over everything. Save your RDE. So this Deco Summit was just something I had. You guys are finding your designs from your customers or whatever your logo is, or if you want to just practice, you can find images online and just bring them in to play with. Okay, most of the time you have your own logos or customers are sending you logos, and you bring it in with the backdrop tool like we did and trace over. So we have, I can answer just one last question, and it is, how do you know you have the right amount of stitches in a text? It just, your density depends on the size and the material you're working with. So you can't have something that's super, super dense on a really lightweight, thin fabric. So usually for text, density, and you'll just have to play with it. There's no right or wrong answer because it depends on what the object is, what material you're working with, but trial and error, and just make sure that you don't go too extreme. So 0.3 is a really good starting point for text density. So any other questions you guys have, you can always email your questions to service@chroma.com. If you're asking a question file, please send us that file. That way we can see exactly what you're referring to and better help out. And make sure it is the original RDE file. And by the end of the day, you will be able to see the webinar. Just check back in maybe an hour or so that way it can load up. But log into your customer portal, go to training schedule, and you will be able to watch this over again. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you. So I don't believe we have any more webinars this week. We do have Deco Summit, so if you guys are planning on attending, we will see you then.